1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Scuba Confidential.
We're back.
Hey.
It's Marcus here, and with me my two friends Ian and Louise.
Hello.
Hello.
It's episode 26, so we're racking through them now.
We got to 26 already.
I know, we're flying. Actually, we've got an anniversary coming up, and it's going to be a year, I think. Is it next month? Is it October?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to try and do is put together a kind of anniversary episode and edit together some of the funniest bits and bits and pieces. We'll see how that turns out. It might just be half an hour of us all laughing. That might be the episode.
Well, I don't think we had too many bloopers, have we?
Maybe for exclusive for patrons, I'll issue a blooper reel of all the rude bits that we couldn't put in the podcast. Anyway, this past month of August, has been a bit of a milestone for us in a few ways.
Another one.
Yeah, we managed to get an interview with Reef World, with Chloe, which was a big thing, and it took months to kind of get that together and find a window when she was around. We hit 15,000 downloads, which
Woohoo!
I know that's crazy, isn't it? Round of applause for that one. And I never thought when we started out doing this we'd ever have more than a handful of our friends listening to it, not people in other parts of the world. It's just us three idiots. And also we had the best month ever in terms of our downloads last month. We had 2,000 or 3,000 downloads in 1 month, which is craziness that people actually will sit and consciously choose to listen to us talking.
I know, it's crazy.
It's sort of a bit beyond my cognition, really, but hey, there you go. So thank you to everyone who has downloaded over the past 9, 10, 11 months, whatever it is we're at now. And thanks for all your support. Keep downloading, keep listening, stay in contact with us. As Ian always says, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends.
Absolutely.
Leave a review where you can. And if you want to get involved, go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. We're going to put a poll on shortly about the future direction of the podcast, what you'd like to see more of. What would you like us to do? Is it interviews? Is it you want to hear more humorous stories? Equipment testing? Whatever it is you feel is on your mind and you'd enjoy more of on the podcast, let us know. Get in contact with us. In this episode, we're going to obviously talk a little bit about what we've been up to. We've got Lou with the news of the world's oldest diver. And no, it's not Ian. And and Jim, who's missing his soulmate.
Jimbo?
Yeah. We've got Ian with his factoids, and we thought we'd just tell a few diving stories this week rather than have something too closely focused on buoyancy or breathing or something along those lines. We'd just tell a few amusing stories from the past about things we've seen that have either gone wrong or have made us laugh or near misses, these kind of things, just to have a little bit of a chat about that. So what have you guys been up to?
I haven't been diving lately, not since the farms. Been really busy with work and things like that. Had a couple of chances to go out on the paddleboard and kayak, and this is another love of mine, to go out and enjoy the North Norfolk coast. Loads of places to go and do that. A couple of times, there was one time I was due to go diving, but the weather conditions was totally wrong, which is unfortunately just how it goes on the coast sometimes, isn't it, around here? So yeah, it's sort of been a busy sort of few weeks since going to the farms, really. And also, just a quick side note as well, I just want to thank the listener for not writing in to support my idea of Fangs movie from the last episode. I thought, get a little bit of support for the Fangs movie, but honestly,
you mean I notice you're here and not Hollywood at the moment, Ian.
Well,
so
exactly, but
Hanging out with Tarantino.
yeah, I'm still waiting to hear from him. So
there you go. Never mind.
What
about you, Lou?
Well, I've been preparing for my holiday to Lembay and Bunaken.
We're not
so
jealous.
We'll be there in a few days.
Wow.
So yeah, very excited. So we've just been checking over dive gear, just checking what we need, anything that needs updating. And yeah, we're going out there in a few days. So I'll be conducting a bit of a report. So hopefully I can grab a 5
Roving
minutes.
reporter.
Yeah, hopefully I can grab 5 minutes with one of the guys out there who runs the dive centre and, just get their slant on things. But I'll be submitting a report when I come back.
Awesome.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah.
That'll be good. And I'm really jealous. I've never been to Lembo. I don't think I've been to Lembo. I've been to Bali. I've never made it that far.
No, I haven't.
But I think the diving there has a reputation for being amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the muck diving, you see all the amazing critters, some of the bigger life. I think it's going to be superb.
Can't wait.
So, yeah, have a great time.
I love that word, critters.
Critters.
It's a great name, isn't it? Critters.
It's another name for one of your films, I think.
Easy.
Well, what have I been doing? I've been training dive masters, really. It's been predominantly what I've been doing. Louise and I, along with the Bear and Woody and Fern and Crispy, we all went up to Stony Cove just as a training facility to make use of that for a weekend, and spent a weekend really coaching the dive masters and spending some time intensively looking at some of the skills they're going to need as they go into the world as dive masters. So we started on the Saturday morning by saying, okay, at this time you guys have to prepare and produce a dive briefing, and we marked their briefings. There's 10 points they have to hit on the briefings and give them feedback on it. And we looked at leading dives. We looked at conducting Discover Scuba Diving in open water. We did the diver tows, which are always quite strenuous for them. It's 100 yards or 100 metres against the clock in full gear, towing someone. That. Yeah, and you obviously you're scored for your pace, and it's a real test of your fitness there as well. And then there's some of the other bits as well. There's always comedy values, trying to teach people how to tie the knots and these kind of things, and do search and recovery stuff. I think it went really well, and we had some good feedback from that, didn't we, Louise?
Yeah.
So that was nice, and they seemed to get something out of it. And for myself and Woody and the Bear, we enjoyed teaching it. And just as well, we couldn't have done it without Louise and Fern and Crispy as dive masters there as well, helping out. Because we all did, we actually did that.
Dive masters.
Yeah, exactly. Good old dive masters. We did that kind of just as a nice gesture for those guys to help them out and offer a bit of coaching, and they seem to get some out of it. And we enjoyed doing it. So
good idea.
It's a win-win, as you would say, Ian.
Yeah,
it's a win-win.
We like
Everyone
win-wins.
wins. Okay, I think we're going to move on now. And here's Louise with the news.
A 96-year-old man has retained his title as the world's oldest scuba diver. Ray Woolley, originally from Cheshire in the UK, completed a 48-minute dive on the Zenobia wreck in Cyprus, along with members of his long-time club, Western Sovereign Bases Area Sub-Aqua Club.
Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. Reaching depths of around 40 metres, Mr. Woolley exceeded the 38 metres recorded during his dive in 2017. And this dive, he was officially recognised as the world's oldest male scuba diver by the Guinness Book of World Records. So he's basically the oldest diver 2 times over so far. Mr. Woolley, who has been a diver for 59 years, served in the Royal Navy during World War II, and he claims that swimming daily for 2 hours keeps him fit and healthy. And that's real proof, really, that good fitness plays a huge part in healthy diving, isn't it?
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit, haven't we?
So important. Good for him. A member of the Portland and Weymouth BSAC Club since 1960, Mr. Woolley worked and dived around the world, but retired to Cyprus in 1999, where he joined the local BSAC Club and became an advanced diving instructor. However, Mr. Woolley's title could soon be snapped up by an American rival. Yeah.
He's got a competitor across the pond, has he?
Oh, yeah. Get this. Bill Lambert, who's aged 99...
A spring chicken.
Yeah. Currently has an application pending to take over the Guinness World Record title. So he's not been diving very long, apparently, Mr. Lambert.
Oh, really?
And he's not as an experienced wreck diver like Mr. Woolley, but...
Right.
At the ripe old age of 99.
The battle is on.
Oh, yeah. It's quite remarkable, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a really cool story, and credit to Ray Woolley for continuing to dive and maintaining his fitness. Swimming 2 hours a day to maintain his fitness at that age, that's excellent stuff. And actually, that wreck, the Zenobia, it's going to sound like I'm showing off a bit, but I've had the privilege of working and living out in Cyprus, and I know the Zenobia wreck reasonably well. It's the number one dive site in Cyprus, really, and rated among the top 10 wreck dives in the world. 172 metres long, Swedish roll-on, roll-off ferry, and it sank on its maiden voyage back in 1980. There was a malfunction with the ballast system. It was run by computers. It was sort of the pioneering days of that. It's probably got more capacity and memory in an iPhone these days. And eventually they had to take the boat out of the harbour, out to sea outside Larnaca, and let it sink. The only casualties were one horse, and I believe the rest was cargo. And it's still an amazing wreck to dive to this day. There's lots on there to see, and even for relatively novice wreck divers, you can still see the captain's quarters and the restaurant area, the canteen kind of area, and it's quite accessible. It drops down, like you said, to about 40 metres, 45 metres, depending on what's going on with the tide. And if you're interested, if you're out there listening to this and you think, wow, that sounds like an amazing wreck to go and see, get in contact with cyprusdivingadventures.com. A guy called Steve is the owner out there, and he'll take you diving there. It's a great place to go diving, and it's a great place, for example, to if you're starting out in your diving and you're doing your advanced open water course. It's a great place to do perhaps your deep and your first ever wreck dive around the outside of a wreck. Is an amazing wreck to see. So, yeah, excellent stuff. What else you got, Lou?
I've got a question for you.
Oh, blimey!
Have you seen Jim? Now, we're not talking about Jim Marshall, who graced us with his presence a few episodes ago.
No.
Let me explain. Jim suits were worn by commercial divers in the offshore diving industry.
Right.
And they basically were invented in the late 1960s in the UK to maintain an interior pressure of 1 bar, regardless of the external pressure. So this enabled workers to dive to deep depths with no risk of decompression illness, nitrogen narcosis, and also no need to decompress on ascent.
Right.
The Jim suits are named after Jim Jarrett, and he was the chief test diver of the earlier Tritonia suit that inspired the invention and was actually made famous by an oceanographer called Sylvia Earle. And they set a human depth record by diving to 381 metres in a Jim suit in 1979.
380.
Yep, apparently so.
That's not for the faint-hearted, that
No. Going back to my original question, basically one of the suits, there's 2 suits, and Jim 18, as it's known, currently stands in the Diving Museum at Gosport in the UK. However, they've issued a request for the Jim 19 suit so that the 2 atmospheric suits can be displayed together in the museum. And the 2 suits actually have a bond, as they were used in a range of assignments for the Ministry of Defence back in the day. So they do essentially belong together.
They're like an old married couple, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So Jim 19's gone AWOL.
Has he?
And yeah, the Diving Museum of Gosport is really, putting an appeal out there.
Wow.
To see if anyone's aware of its location. Richard Castle, who's a former Jim engineer and one of the Historical Diving Society volunteers, has said that if anyone can assist us in locating Jim 19, even if it's only to say that it's in another museum, we'll be eternally grateful for the information. So if anyone out there listening knows of the whereabouts of the Jim suit, they can actually contact Mr. Castle, and his email address is t479rcc@gmail.com. So he's put it out there to say, look, you can contact me if you've got any information about this suit. I'm sure they'd be really grateful.
I mean, I've seen one of these suits. I've seen the pictures, and there was a bit when it was featured in a James Bond film, which I'll talk about in a moment.
Yeah.
But they're quite sizable. You've got to get in it and then be wrapped in it, and it's a mechanical kind of suit, and it's not the kind of thing you casually have lying around in your attic and not forgotten about. But there might be someone out there who has a connection, maybe worked in the industry back then, or a friend of a friend who worked in the industry who may know something about it. So if you do, email our man here on the address given, and who knows, we may end up this old married couple may be reunited. Interestingly, when you sent this news over item, Lou, I noticed that this suit was used in the James Bond film For Your Eyes Only.
Yes.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I found the clip actually. It's a classic kind of James Bond clip. There's him and his female companion, shall we call it, exploring into this wreck looking for some mystery widget or whatever they need to save the world. And then suddenly the bad guy comes bursting into the wreck in one of these gym suits.
Like you do.
like you do. And they have this underwater battle inside this wreck. And it is, it's classic tongue-in-cheek James Bond, Roger Moore at his finest. And what we'll do is we'll stick the link on social media and then everyone else can enjoy it as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great news items. Thanks for that, Lou.
No worries.
So on this episode, what we thought we'd look at is just a few diving stories. What's made you laugh most on a dive trip? What's infuriated you? What near misses or kind of cock-ups have you seen over the years where people have been lucky to get away with it, or perhaps they've done something they shouldn't have done in the water? And, you know, this isn't to point the finger at anyone in particular, and needless to say, none of these incidents we were about to talk about ended up with anyone being seriously injured. But we just thought there'd be kind of amusing stories where we could reflect on what we've been up to and some of the things we've seen over the years, and there might be some learning stuff in there. We'll see what happens. So what we'll do is we'll perhaps have Louise can tell the first one.
Hey, well, this is a bit of an embarrassing one. We've all messed up, haven't we? A couple of years ago, I was diving at Stony Cove in the UK, and it was raining really, really hard. So on the surface interval, I decided to keep my dry suit zipped up just to keep dry. And I had a backpack with me, and because I had some snacks with me and I think there's a bit of paperwork, so I thought I'll put it on all in there in the backpack and I'll put it over the top of my dry suit on the surface interval like you do. Right. So I was kind of mooching about, and then we come to get in to do the second dive and we kit up, so I put my scuba unit on and kind of get my stuff all sorted.
A horrible idea where this is heading.
And and then me and my buddy start doing our buddy check, as you do, and just started laughing her head off. And it soon turned out that I'd left my backpack on and put my scuba unit over
Dora
the
the
top.
Explorer with a backpack.
Yeah, well, I look a bit more like Hunchback Notre Dame. I was just thinking, why doesn't my BCD sit right? You usually you got your back plate and it's nice and comfortable. And I had bottles of water and snacks.
That must have been a bit weird,
because
because sometimes you find that with your BCD, you put it on, even though it's exactly the same as it was the dive before. Don't you find you
sometimes
put it on?
It doesn't sit right.
Don't sit right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was rather embarrassing. So, but all the story is, do your buddy check. Yeah, it's always good.
Kit up in teams, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Fortunately, I didn't jump in with it on. That would have been even more embarrassing.
Well, I mean, who would jump in with a dry suit undone or something?
Well, exactly. Who would do that?
No, my mind's blank
Escapes
as well.
me, yeah.
I've never done that.
No. Possibly.
Yeah. So I was gonna when I was reflecting on stuff I've seen where I was working as a guide or an instructor and I've seen stuff go a bit wrong. The first one that sprung to mind really was one where a guy didn't listen to the briefing and didn't listen to instructions, and it could have been nasty, but luckily we were able to kind of avert the problem at the very, very last minute before he got himself into trouble, and all that was left really was him looking very embarrassed sat in the water. So what it was I was working in Asia on a dive boat, and I was leading a group of divers, and one of the divers within my group was a Russian chap, and obviously I'm going to change names to so there's no implication.
All right, comrade.
Yeah. So let's call him Ivan, just as a
Ivan the Terrible.
Really?
Ivan as a Russian name.
Let's not stereotype at all.
Well, if he was a Brit, we'd call him Nigel or John, I suppose. So
Ivan the Terrible. I'm
doing the briefing and I'm explaining to the group, including Ivan, that when the skipper brings us into this particular reef, it's called Sharkfin Reef, and it's a kind of a granite pinnacle that sits out in the open next to Island 2 and 3 of the Similan Islands in off the coast of Thailand. There's going to be current, and what's going to happen is the skipper's going to bring the boat into position. We're all going to be ready, and when we're signalled, I'll jump in first. The rest can follow, giant stride in, meet me on the surface. Now, this is important, guys. When we jump into the water, the main vessel we're jumping from is going to be towing the Zodiac on a line. So, when you jump in, join me on the surface, away from the line for the Zodiac, and then together we're going to descend. Everyone clear on that? Yep. Okay, let's go do a buddy checks, and off we go. So we finally get to the reef, and it's time to kit up, and the skipper's bringing the boat into position, and everyone's ready. So what tends to happen is, and sometimes divers may not notice this if they're customers, there's usually a webcam on the actual dive deck.
Right.
So all the divers are buddy checked, they're in position, everything's looking good. Ivan's there, and just to give you some context to this guy is huge. I mean, he's big. He's like a big guy. I don't mean toned, muscular big guy. I mean, he's big.
He's big.
He likes his food, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Rotund.
Rotund is a good word, and all he's wearing is some blue budgie smugglers.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's not a nice sight. But he's kitted up. To be fair to him, he's kitted up and he's ready. And we make our way down to the dive platform. Everyone's there, fins on, masks on, ready to go. And I signal the skipper on the webcam. So there's a little camera just pointing backwards to where the platform is, and I give him the okay to bring the boat into final position. We go to enter the water, we get the signal, we enter the water, and 3 of the 4 guys I'm with bob back to the surface and immediately join me. Ivan decides he doesn't need the likes of me and the other guys to go diving, and just floats off away from us in the current at the dive site towards where the Zodiac is, and he's busy playing with his camera on the surface, and I'm signalling to him and saying, please, can you come and join the rest of us? We need to descend quickly before we go past the site. We need to get together and leave the surface fairly quickly. And he's just ignoring me. And eventually, without any kind of further contact with me, he just deflates his BCD, deflates his jacket, and leaves the surface. I'm like, okay, this isn't good. He's right next to the Zodiac. He's leaving the surface. He's sort of 5 meters or so from me, from where I am with the rest of the group. So I say to the rest of the group, okay, we need to go down and try and get together with this guy, because we can't have him just disappearing on his own at this dive site. It's not going to be good. We need to regroup. So I just check they're okay, and we leave within a couple of seconds of that and leave the surface. And as we leave the surface, and I glance over, I check my 3 are okay, glance just to one side to see where Ivan's disappeared to, and I notice that as he's descended, having ignored my instruction, he's managed to loop his tank in his first stage around the line for the Zodiac.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, on the surface, the crew and the captain are like, oh, Marcus's group are gone. Happy days. He puts the boat in gear and starts to move the main vessel forward. He hits the gas in the main vessel. And as I see this happening, I'm trying to signal to Ivan.
Water skiing.
Yeah. Because the main vessel's then going to move away at perhaps 3, 4, 5, 6 knots, something along those lines. And I see the line go taut. And then Ivan start to go backwards through the water like some sort of epileptic spider as he disappears away from me. And I'm like, okay, what do we do here? This is sort of he's not listened. He's got himself tangled. So I turn to my group, abort. We come back to the surface as safely and quickly as we can. We're only at sort of 2, 3, 4 meters, something along those lines. We've only just left the surface enough for me to make sure they're
Houston,
okay.
We've got a problem.
Exactly. Houston, we've got a problem. And then I get to the surface, give the sort of emergency abort sign to my Thai crew on the back of the dive deck to stop the boat. And then we swim across and find him sort of 20 meters away, half into his BCD, where he's obviously tried to undress himself as he's being towed backwards, looking very, very sheepish.
I bet.
And the funny thing is, he stayed with us for the remaining dives on that trip. Yeah, he was slightly more malleable to listening to what we had to say.
Sheepish.
Yeah. But, it's one of those things. It's just listening to the briefings. And I think, normally if an instructor or guide, whoever it is, wherever you are in the world, says something, there's normally a reason behind it. If we say, when you get in, come and join me on the surface, it's because we know we've got some signals to do behind the scenes. We know where the hazards are, because we know that the captain's going to take off with the boat. And if you get tangled with the Zodiac, then that sort of thing's going to happen. And it could have been nasty, to be fair. But we managed to stop Ivan having too much of a problem. So, yeah, there you go.
Had a terrible time.
Oh, dear, oh dear. I hear all the people downloading groaning at that.
Here all next week.
Yeah, he's here. Yeah, tip your waitress.
Yeah.
Enjoy the veal. All right, you had one, Ian, didn't you? About just a moment of when you really enjoyed your first dive.
Well, last year I did my first liveaboard. This is my first night dive as well, actually, proper night dive. So not just like out in the dusk as it's getting dark, but actually proper going out in the dark abroad. It was in the Ras Mohammed Nature Reserve in the just off the Egyptian coast. Beautiful part of the world, and the sea's lovely and warm, really clear, and really excited to jump in. And it's not one of them stories where things went wrong like in yours. And it's just one of them surreal moments that we have. If any of our listeners have seen I once watched was Space Odyssey 2001, and there's a part in that film where you see the lights coming up, and I remember swimming about and having a lovely time, really enjoying my first night dive, looking around, and it's one of the first dives where you actually get peace and quiet when you, because later on in the week, some of the night dives I was on, it's quite noisy. You do get a lot of noise, don't you? Sometimes you get stuff going on with the boat, clanking. You get other boats turning up for mooring and things like that. And it was one of them dives where there's nothing. It was lovely. A lovely still.
It's tranquility.
Was, yeah. And it's still my best night dive to date, I think. And I remember looking around and you enjoying the fish and you look around your torch and stuff like that. And you're just enjoying bobbing about, taking it all in, absorbing it, and it's dark, and you can see in the distance the little lights and stuff, and you're checking over to your left, see where the boat is, and you can see where they've dropped a little light, so you know where to go back. It's always good to get home,
Yeah, that's just one of your
catchphrases. I remember looking around, seeing these lights in the distance, and I was saying, "Wow, this is awesome!" And it made me think of that film.
So it's quite a significant moment for you as a diver, as one of those epiphany moments. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, it is. It's a reminder of why you dive. It's a reminder of why you go to, especially in this country, where and you practice your dive and your buoyancy. In England,
so it's a real treat when you go somewhere like Egypt.
Sometimes, awesome!
It?
Yeah,
or Lembe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Lembe.
It's awesome. So I totally enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a game changer, that first night dive. And when you talk to students, perhaps you're teaching an open water course, you might have had this, and you're talking about a night dive. They go, "Oh, it must be scary. It must be this. It must be that." And I've always found, like, even on the first one, I felt the same way you did, Ian, where I went in expecting one thing and it was something completely different. It was really tranquil.
Yeah.
And I wanted just to have like Cafe Del Mar or Pink Floyd pumped in through some headphones
Do you
while
know
I was
what?
down
I've
there.
often thought that. I thought how good that would be to have when you're diving sometimes, and you get these chill out tunes. Don't you? I think Ministry of Sound do one, don't they? Of these different tunes you could listen to.
Like a soundtrack, like a backdrop to your experience.
How awesome that would be. As you're just bobbing around, you're chilling out, enjoying the fish, and you think, "Oh, this is great. Here's an octopus. There we go." And you got something playing away in the background. How awesome would that be?
I'm sure it won't be long. The technology will be there soon, I'm sure.
Well, you can get earphones for swimming, can't you? So if you're into swimming a lot, and you're banging out the lengths and stuff, you can listen to different tunes and stuff to take your mind off your lengths.
Yeah, it's always an option. Yeah, if you're getting in a rhythm where you're banging out your lengths. I think with diving, it would be a pressure thing. With your headphones, you wouldn't be able to descend and have your ears blocked the same as you. You need to equalise as well. Yeah. But
I like silence underwater. I like it.
There is a lot of noise pollution, don't you find, with diving sometimes?
Yeah, there's no mobile phones.
Especially with some customers,
Yeah.
It's that screaming going on in the background. Help! Help! And you're like, what's that?
Not on our watch, though.
Yeah.
That's when you need a good dive master at the back, you see, to sort out the issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just thought I'd mention it.
Okay. Have you got another one, Lee?
I have. Yeah. It's literally just come into my brain.
Has it?
Yeah.
Good
I'm
Lord.
Share it. Well, a few years ago, about 8 years ago, I think you were there actually, Marcus. We went to Malta for a bit of a club trip. And during that time over there, I did my rec course, on which I think you were my actual instructor.
Was I?
Yeah. And I always remember a particular dive. There's a really cool wreck in Malta called the Rosie. One of the wreck dives that we did was on this particular one. And I think it sits at around 30 metres, so it's quite a deep dive. And there's myself and I think there's about 8 other people in the group, so it's quite a large group. One of the guys was getting on well with the course. I always remember this particular dive. Me and my buddy dropped down, and we were it was the dive. I think it was dive 3, and we were laying our reels and laying the lines and assessing any hazards.
I know where this is going. I remember it now. It's coming back to me.
You're still getting therapy, I think.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So me and my buddy, and we're doing our thing and doing our training, and all of a sudden, all this weed and muck starts flying up.
Where's that
What's
come
going on? Being in Malta, it's pretty good visibility. all this stuff starts kicking up. Turn around, there's a member of the group, bless him, he'd tried to lay the line, got caught up in the reel, got in a bit of a bird's nest with it. So rather than stopping and thinking, he decides to just keep turning, and he managed to wrap himself around the reel, or wrap the reel around him. And rather than just think rationally, he decides to take one of his fins off as well.
Really?
Just to add to the situation.
Yeah,
How did you manage to do that?
You have to picture the scene here, and I'm just...
It's hilarious.
It wasn't for me.
What,
No.
did this fin just come off, or did
No,
he
no, no,
actually
no,
need
no,
to
no.
take it
Took
off?
his fin off.
No.
To try and unravel himself.
So what it was the...
But once you take your fin off, that's it, in the water.
Well,
You're
at
dead in
30
the
metres,
water.
it's not a great idea.
No.
No, it wasn't. It was... I'm trying to think of the name of the wreck, and you have to excuse me while
It
I
was
just...
the Rosie.
Was it the Rosie?
Was it the P29?
I think it was the P29, which is a
right.
German patrol boat.
Yeah.
And that wreck, I remember it because it was a patrol boat, so it was one of those ones where, because of the visibility, I could kind of go down the centre line of the vessel and monitor a couple of groups as you were tying off. And we'd been through the whole briefing thing of keep the line taut and showing you how to tie off in different ways and blah, blah, blah. And I remember vividly you with your buddy, and I won't mention any names, but your buddy and yourself would do absolutely perfect. I'm looking across to one side of the wreck. Yeah, Louise and her buddy are doing fine. They're tying off. Fantastic. I look back to the other side, and this chap with his buddy, like you said, he's not only has he let the line go slack, he's then managed to tangle it around himself and loop it around his foot several times. And like you said, Lou, rather than think rationally, pause, breathe, establish some neutral buoyancy, get your buddy to help you.
Yeah.
His answer was, it's wrapped around my foot. I can't unwrap it because of my fin. I know what I'll do. I'll take my fin off. And he was sort of breakdancing on the deck
Pretty
of this wreck with a fin in one hand and a reel in the other.
Any life that was on this wreck, so a little bit of growth on them. It was just being kicked up and wrecked, and it was it was just hilarious to watch. Like you say, he looked like he was breakdancing at 30 metres, rolling around, cartwheeling and all sorts.
Yeah. And it wasn't there was an immediate danger because the conditions were good. There was no current or anything like that.
No.
But it was just chaotic.
Yeah.
And I remember just having to go over, get his buddy to stay with him, my memory of it is, and you have to excuse me because it's a decade or so back now probably, but pinning him, just getting him to stay still while we then unravelled him on the deck and replaced his fin for him and give him a little reminder sign to keep the line taut and keep it clear of his body.
Line is a nightmare in the water, though, and that happened to something
if you
similar to
deploy
me
it
like that.
slowly and properly, there's not a problem.
No.
Yeah.
Really.
First time I
you
went
know.
to the Farne Islands, my buddy at the time, he had a finger reel
Yeah.
going along, and he dropped it. We were mid-water in about 10 metres, I suppose. And I thought, well, I'll go down and get it. And because he didn't see it, I saw it drop off. So I went down to go get it. By the time I'd gone down to get it, picked it up, and I was like, I'm actually entangled in it. And I didn't even know how I'd done it. And it's just like, I was like, the more you try and untangle yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, your dive master.
Yeah. And as I then looked up, there he was staring at me and just went, what are you doing?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing?
So
I
you
was
tried
like,
to do him a favour.
yeah, I tried to do him a
Yeah.
favour. It's like, it's your reel. And I'm now
Terrific.
tangled up in it.
Yeah.
Help.
How did you get out of that situation then?
Well, luckily enough, I passed him the reel.
Take your fin off?
No, I didn't take the fins off, no. But I then just sort of kind of clambered out and got it over my head. And
Yeah.
with a bit of his help.
Like you
so.
say, it
Yeah.
can be dangerous.
Yeah.
You've only got to start panicking
No,
or...
I won't mention any names, Jim.
Well, I think as well, just going back to that Malta one, if you are that guy out there, and I'm not going to mention it, and you recognise yourself in that story from doing that course with me, I know you've moved on as a diver, and that's all part of the training is learning from your mistakes, and I know you're an accomplished diver now, and that's why you do the courses under supervision, so if it does go a little bit awry, there's someone experienced there watching you, can help you get out of those issues that you have. So, yeah. Well, I've got a couple of other stories, but I don't want to bore people with telling stories, so I could go on all night. But
Salty sea dog.
Salty sea dog stories. I've got two. I'll give you a choice. The first one is the buoy line versus cameras and the Chinese dive group, or option B is SMS Colne versus Crocodile Dundee.
Oh, Crocodile Dundee. You've got to have a bit of Crocodile Dundee.
I was watching that the other night.
Yeah, it's a good film. I like that film, actually. It's a good film.
G'day, mate.
Classic.
Now, again, I've just used a stereotype name. It was just an Aussie chap. I was working up in Scapa Flow.
Is his name Bruce?
Mick.
I can't recall his name, actually. But, you know, for the sake of this, we'll pick a name. What name shall we give him?
What's the Crocodile Dundee's name?
Mick Dundee.
Mick, yeah.
Mick.
Okay, so with Mick and a couple of other people I'm going diving with. And the particular wreck we were going to dive on this day was the SMS Colne. Now, the SMS Colne is a German battle cruiser. It sits in about 35 metres of water. It sits on its starboard side, and the port side of the hull at the shallowest point is about 18 metres, depending on the tide. And we had this dive plan where they were all quite experienced divers, but Mick had a GoPro, which is sort of a blessing and a curse at the same time. You know, I'm all for getting nice footage, but do it in a responsible way, you know. And the plan was we were going to drop down the line onto the Colne, just in case there was we don't get blown off the wreck with any kind of water movement. Group on the wreck, drop down to the sort of centre line of the wreck, which ran along about 30 metres. Head towards the bow, and just under the bow, the point of the vessel, right at the very tip of the bow, there's an opening. There's a kind of a hole which then leads into a swim through. The swim through runs down just beneath deck level of the vessel, and it's I don't know if it's, I haven't been there in a couple of years. It may have collapsed a little bit by now, but it used to be you'd go through at that sort of 30 metres, 28 metres, and you would swim between the kind of struts that supported what was the deck at that when it was a functioning ship. And it was like the scene in Star Wars when they're going into the Death Star, where you go into this groove inside the wreck, and there's daylight all around. You can get out, you know, pretty much any point out into the open ocean again. And I'd brief these...
Stay on target.
Yeah, stay on target. And I'd brief these guys that the deal was I would lead us in there. We would do an air check before we went in. We'd do a computer check before we went in. We'd make sure everything was hunky-dory. We had at least the turn point that we needed. We hadn't breached those. And we'd just gently go through the swim through, and they were to follow me. And as we got to about midships, we would then pop back out into the open sea next to the wreck, near where the bridge was, and gently make our way back up to the shot line. So we're going through the wreck, and everything's hunky-dory, and brilliant. And obviously it's quite confined, so you can't turn around too much and check everyone's okay. You can look over your shoulder and give an okay sign. And I've got a dive master at the back as well, to kind of taking up the rear, as you'd say, Ian.
Absolutely. We look after the rear.
You do look after the rear.
We do.
Yeah. And then we get to the point of going out of the vessel. I turn around, Mick's still behind me, okay, and I then signal that we're going outside of the wreck. And the idea was I would then go outside. It's literally a couple of metres to be back out into the open sea, hanging at about 25 metres next to the wreck. I come outside the wreck, I do a little helicopter turn, spin round to do a head count as I come out. 1, 2... Where's number 3? So I've got a dive master and Mick's buddy, and no Mick. Mick, meanwhile, has disappeared further into the wreck with his GoPro.
Oh, that's handy.
And I've got the rest of the group there sitting outside the wreck at sort of 25, 30 metres, looking at me. What do we do now? So this guy's just disappeared off on his own inside the wreck at this point. And it's like, this could go horribly wrong here. Mm-hmm. So you're then in a position where it's like, okay, these guys out here are safe. They're with the dive master. Dive master, you watch these guys. Wait here. 5 minutes, max. I then backtrack down the route of going to find this guy busy filming, and he's with some other chap inside the wreck. I don't know who this other chap is. He's another diver who's up there from another boat on another charter. And he's there, and I'm sort of tugging at his fin and telling him pronto to get out the wreck. And he's almost kind of gesturing to me like, well, let me finish my filming first.
Of course.
And finally, I managed to kind of gesticulate enough that he gets the idea, and he tracks back out of the wreck. And luckily, we managed to get back to the shot line within safe bounds and come up and do our stops and get back out of the water. But it's just one of those ones where the chap, bless him, he was a nice enough guy, but he just wasn't paying attention. He obviously hadn't either listened to the briefing or had a good look at what I looked like under the water And I'm fairly easy to spot. If anyone sees me under the water, I've got a slap strap with the Batman logo on the back of it and a flashing strobe, so I'm quite easy to identify under the water. But he'd gone off with someone else thinking it was me. And I don't know what he was thinking, because he could have been down there and just ran himself out of air or run himself into a serious amount of deco and had to make an ascent outside of safe limits. And he could have had a massive issue, but there you go.
Is this a good time to remind our listener to maybe listen to episode 1 where we go on about dive briefing? That's a good time to always revise.
I think they should.
That's so important.
It is dive briefing.
Download all our episodes immediately.
Other ones are available.
So there you go. The only other thing I was going to mention was a story about when I was teaching several years ago with a friend of mine called Rosie. And if you're out there, Rosie, listening, then hello. Rosie was another instructor, and I think she'd fairly recently passed her instructor exams and was team teaching with me just to get in the groove with her teaching and this kind of thing. And we went up to teach this group, and one particular member of this group was the chap. He was a little bit older, and he was, in Norfolk we would say, he's carrying a bit of timber. As in, he's a slightly larger gentleman. And every time, the physical side of it was getting to him, and he's feeling a bit of strain. Huffing and puffing a little bit. But his tell, if it was like a poker game, his tell was that every time he bent over to pick up the tank, he let out an enormous fart. And it became like this thing where it's really, I don't know if he realised he was doing it or if he was trying to ignore it and pretend it hadn't happened, but it just became more and more difficult.
Excuse me, Captain.
Yeah, more tea, Vicar. It just became more and more difficult to keep a straight face as we're teaching the course. And in the end, it was like, okay, Rosie, you just have to watch them as they kit up. I'm just going to have to stand over here a little bit away from the group. He'd bend over to set up his BCD on his tank, and you'd hear it.
You can have that one on me.
Luckily, diving's an open air sport, isn't it? So at least you're outside in a breeze, then it's not so much of an issue. But I wouldn't have wanted to be in his dry suit at the end of the weekend.
Oh, no. Definitely would have stunk of garlic.
Garlic?
Garlic? We want a garlic again, aren't we?
Ian's garlic obsession.
My dry suit always smells of garlic for some reason.
Nice.
Yeah, well, you're just filling it full of naan bread.
I don't know why it smells of garlic. It's
no
a bit
vampires
weird,
going near you, are there?
No.
We've got a story from one of our listeners, actually. He's kindly sent us in a message via Instagram.
Awesome.
So apologies if I pronounce your Instagram handle incorrectly. It's Kitsun Mikan. And she says she was working in Malta and was the only French speaker in her team. So she had all the French divers in the group. And one day, this old guy came in who hadn't dived in a year, but had all his own gear with him that was clearly as old as he was. And the first dive, she kept an eye on him to make sure he was okay. But he was quite a proud person, and he made it quite clear that he didn't need help or advice from a 19-year-old dive master. So the first dive went okay, but the second dive, he didn't connect his BCD to his tank properly. So he jumps in the water, and she says she just had the reflex to jump in, keep him afloat with BCD fully inflated, and put his tank between her legs and reconnected his tank to the BCD. Apparently he spent the rest of his dive vacation calling me his guardian angel and told everyone about the rescue mission, and he was very appreciative, apparently.
I bet he was.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Crisis narrowly avoided there.
Yeah, exactly. You do see quite a bit of that where a guide will spot something and with a customer, and it's nice when the customers appreciate it rather than see it as kind of a personal criticism of them, because we do try and, as you know, when you guys work as DMs, you try and look out for people, and if you see something, it could be something simple like an octopus or an alternate air source dangling, or a loose tank, or whatever it happens to be. You kind of try and have your wits about you and spot these things for people.
Jump on it. Yeah.
That's nicely timed communication as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks ever so much for contacting us, and really nice to hear from you.
Yeah. Now, we were nearly going to wrap up, and then I remembered there's one crucial bit of this episode we almost forgot, and it's Mr. Ian with his factoids.
Absolutely. Right, okay, I've got some factoids for you. That's for the last episode, so steady yourselves. Now, once again, little caveat. These possibly may be true, possibly. We'll leave that to your own thoughts to whether they are or not. Did you know King Canute, have you heard of King Canute?
I am aware of King Canute.
He was called King Canute the Great. In 1000 AD, was King of Denmark, England and Norway. Denmark, England and Norway was often referred to as the North Sea Empire.
Right,
Did you know?
okay.
He was famous for the king who stood at the shoreline on the beach, and he commanded the sea to stop
He thought he was
go
above
backwards.
nature,
He
didn't
did.
he? Yeah.
But actually, there's been more thought on that, and that he was actually demonstrating that there are higher powers than the king.
Okay. So King Canute, for anyone who looks it up on the internet,
Spelt,
you have to be really careful how you spell his name, is what I'm
yes.
saying.
There is
One
there is-
misspelling and you're in trouble.
Yes, it's spelled King, then C-N-U-T
Yeah.
is the correct spelling.
Yeah. So, if you're typing it in at work,
Be careful.
Be careful.
be careful
Yeah,
what
make sure
shows
you
up
get
on your
the C and the
browsing
N
history.
and the U and the T in the right
Yeah.
order there.
Yeah, okay.
In the 16th century, Alexander the Great was lowered over the side of his ship in a glass diving bell. And this is illustrated in an Islamic painting which was done around about the same time. Did you know?
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Little
and that
history lesson as
it
well.
was the first time a diving bell had been used. And
What
it
year
done
was this
by,
again?
Around about the 16th century.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Alexander the Great. Submarines, the military ones, operate in total darkness without windows or lights. Did you know?
Mm-hmm.
In stealth mode, they cannot use any active sonar systems to ping ahead and find any sort of hazards like undersea mountains, drilling rigs or other submarines.
So they're literally going blind
Well,
just
they
with
have to
whatever
use-
mapping they've got.
Well, submarines can only follow charted routes. They can't just, I didn't realise this, but they can't just veer off into any part of the sea. They have to follow charted routes. Okay. And but they have got other technology now, which will help them guide, find different ways. And jellyfish have been around for more than 650 million years.
Not the same one, presumably.
No, which means they outdate the dinosaurs, sharks, and Marcus.
Wow.
Wow.
And they are my factoids for this episode.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
That's
Ian.
okay.
I think that's pretty much it for this episode, unless you guys have anything else to say. Louise, we wish you safe travels with you and the bear. Have an absolutely
you.
amazing
good trip.
time in Lembe and try and collar some people and get some good reporting
I
done.
shall.
And we'll see what you come back with.
I just want as always, just remind everybody to please like and share our episode and review if you can. That'd be great, and that's a free way of supporting the show.
There you go, King Canute of Bungay.
Yeah, there we go.
So on that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. The next episode, because Louise is away, we're gonna try and stick to our normal 2-week space between the episodes and get together in the studio again. But if there's a slight delay, just bear with us. We haven't forgotten you. We'll be back. And we'll see you next time on Scuba Confidential. Bye-bye.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Scuba Confidential. We really appreciate you tuning in today. We'd like to clarify that we're in no way affiliated with any agency or organisation. All opinions expressed during this podcast are our own. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at ScubaConfident1, Instagram and Facebook at Scuba Confidential, and if you'd like to support us via Patreon, go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. Any contribution is really appreciated. Additionally, if you have any suggestions for topics or discussions, just let us know at scubaconfidential@gmail.com. Many thanks to Plunkett Music for the groovy tunes, and we'll catch up next time. Until then, keep diving.